Welcome to Play by Players, an MLS PA podcast. This show is brought to you by the players and is all about the players, both past and present, who have plied their trade in MLS. You'll hear about each player's journey into the game, their careers and life after the game, on the field and off. It's all on the table. Now here's your host, former MLS player, Bobby Boswell.
Welcome to another episode of Play by Players, brought to you by the MLS Players Association. I am the host, Bobby Boswell. Today we are joined by one of the members of the newest teams in Major League Soccer, St. Louis Soccer Club. He has played over 160 professional games at the ripe young age of 28 years old, with a majority of those games with Canadian side Vancouver. He has won the Canadian Championship. He has MLS experience. He's got MLS playoff experience. He's got CONCACAF championship experience. He's got USL experience. Please welcome to the podcast, Jake Nerwinski.
Thanks for having me. I like how you put the ripe young age of 28. I like that. I'll stick with that.
To me, you're a young guy, and we get into it a little bit in the podcast. But on the teams you've been on, you kind of are. You're a young veteran, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I'm currently the third oldest on St. Louis, which is just absurd to me that 28 is the third oldest now. But it's all right. I think it's still young. I'm going to say it's still young.
Listen, when I played, my favorite story I tell people is I played with Pat Onstad in Houston, we had Danny Cruz on the team. Pat's now a GM. Danny's a coach at in USL, but Pat was older than Danny Cruz's parents, which is why he said he decided to retire. So he was 43 at that point. So when I see 28 years old, that's young to me. But
I got plenty of time.
Exactly. You got a long runway ahead of you. We'll probably have you on again here in about 8 years to see where you're at. But,
perfect.
Well, look, I normally ask guys how they're doing, but with the way that you guys have opened this season, I'd have to imagine you're doing great. We're going to get into UCONN. You've got to feel really good. You probably won some of your pools in terms of, just picking your boys to go all the way. So sometimes, things come together nicely. You have to feel like this is maybe a great year for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly starting that way. First, shout out to UCONN, another national championship. I was my freshman year at UCONN. We actually won it in 2014. So that was an incredible experience. So it's cool to, see them win it again. But, as for St. Louis, I mean, there's not much to say other than this has been a dream start for us. I know a lot of people had doubts, which is, I guess, the norm for a new expansion team. It's an easy thing to say that we're not going to be that good. But I think so far we've proven a lot of people wrong. So it's that's also another little satisfaction there.
Yeah, no, we're going to get a little bit into that later. But, as a longtime fan of MLS, what you guys are doing is pretty incredible. You're breaking records and, you really set the bar. I always joke around and say, you don't want to set the bar too high, too early, but when it's hot, you might as well ride it. So I know you've got to be excited about that. Let's start, that's where we are now. We're going to make our way back around there. Let's start take it back to the beginning for you, which is in the rich soccer state rather of New Jersey. Talk a little bit about growing up in do I say Lawrenceville?
Yeah, you got it.
I say Mercer County, right? Like, would you say?
Yeah, I mean Mercer County is like the hub, for like New Jersey soccer, I think, and that's where my dad grew up. And so I come from a family that's a big soccer family. My grandfather was an All-American at Rider University, in Mercer County in Lawrenceville, which ends up, being a mile away from my home, now, my parents' home now. My dad played at Old Dominion and Rider as well. So soccer has always been, in my blood. So I guess we could fast forward to, playing academy at NJSA. I was coached under Tab Ramos at the time. So that was, it's a pretty special thing, to have somebody that you grew up, watching at the Metro Stars. That was, our local MLS team at the time. So it was pretty cool to play, under him, learn from him. And I think he was pretty instrumental in, me being where I am today. He was the one who kind of everybody's a forward, right, in the beginning of their careers up until a certain age, and you get pushed back. But I remember having a talk with him, and he's saying that, I think right back is your position. Never played there before. I was, always a number 9 or a number 10, and 14, 15, 16 growing up. But around 16, he pushed me back to right back. I think that was the best decision he made for me, and I made for myself as well.
Well, Tab has a special place in my heart. You watched him at the Metro Stars. I watched him in the '94 World Cup, and when I met him, I told him, I think I told him I cried when he got elbowed in the face and broke his face, and he was like, "That's a weird thing to tell another grown man." But that's the typical. I played with guys from New Jersey my whole life. Shout out to guys that have been on this podcast from there, specifically Aleko Eskandarian. And I feel like every time I meet someone from New Jersey that I have like a bond with them, just to like start talking trash, just because like that's you guys are good people, and there's a lot of history there that you live up to and you've embraced in your childhood, it sounds like.
Yeah, New Jersey, we could take it, but we can dish it out as well. We got a little bit of grit to us, so yeah, I'm always open for that.
Well, you mentioned your grandfather playing. I always joke around and say most guys that played soccer, when they go to their hometown, they say, "Oh, that's Jake. He's the mayor of Mercer County." But in your family, you actually had a mayor, right? Growing up, your grandfather was the mayor of the town.
Yeah, that same grandfather. He lived his whole life in Lawrence. He was mayor for 16 years, which is pretty cool to have that. So he's pretty well known in our town.
Yeah, I bet you had to be a straight edge guy, and I think your dad's a judge, so it's like poor Jake's got to behave all the time because he's got people looking at it.
Oh yeah, I know. Going to high school in Lawrence was everybody knew the Nerwinski name just from my grandfather. My dad, he still works there. He's the city manager now, so he just does a little bit of everything around the town.
All right. Well, you kind of you stole my thunder in that everyone played soccer. I know you have a sister that also went to college and played soccer. Yeah. Was it always soccer for you, or you're a very athletic guy? I mean, did you play any other sports, or was it always just a one sport guy?
Yeah, growing up, I played baseball and basketball up until my sophomore year of high school. Then I decided to just solely focus on soccer. But a little fun fact is that I was one game away from going to the Lily World Series when I was 12 years old. And it's still, it still kind of gets to me a little bit that I couldn't quite get there. We lost by 2 runs. It's just, that's my little tidbit. Yeah.
That would have been your shot at glory. Would you have stuck with baseball if you had made it to the World Series?
Who knows, right? Who knows? What if I hit a home run or 2? You never know what would have happened.
All right. Well, you kind of you talked about it. You started off in rec like most, and then you made the transition to NJSA, real creative name there for you Jersey guys. But we talked a little bit about Tab and how he kind of started transitioning you back. But before all that, I mean, did you know at a young age that soccer was, you wanted to be was it, I want to go to college and play, or I want to be a pro? Like what was your mindset growing up? Was it just about having fun, or was it, let's see how far I can ride this thing?
Yeah, I think it was always trying to, get to college, to play to college, get a scholarship and, experience that. And to be honest, I didn't think about playing professionally until probably my end of my junior year in college. So growing up, that was never really the plan for me. Obviously I would have loved it if that was the case. I was never really, the best player on my team, on my academy team. So it was just, to see how far I can go. And at the time I thought that was only, getting a scholarship to at least a D1 school.
Okay. Well, before we get to college and the career you had, talk a little bit about your family has a history at Notre Dame High School, which that threw me for a loop, preparing for this. But I joke around, like, it was harder for me to figure out who that Tab Ramos was your coach than your high school coach. It was more media and and that might be the most talked about thing of your past was just your college coach and your family playing for this guy. Talk to us a little bit about Notre Dame.
Yeah, so my dad had the same high school coach as me. So this guy has been around forever. He actually just recently retired. He's a Mercer County, New Jersey high school soccer legend. So it was pretty special to be coached by the same guy that coached my dad in high school.
That's awesome. And I think your uncle went there too, right? Your uncle was.
Yes. My uncle was, it was his, so that was the coach's first season, was my uncle's first year.
And does your uncle and your dad, do they take credit for all your success?
Oh, a little bit. My dad does. My uncle is a season ticket holder for the Union. So
Okay.
he's a big soccer guy, but yeah, he's a diehard Union fan.
He's probably ruined my night or two, with the things those guys yell at you. You know what that's like. So that's pretty cool.
You would never guess that he would be yelling that kind of stuff though if you met him. Very mild tempered guy.
I'm sure all Philly and Boston fans say that. There's a reason that they have home field advantage. So,
yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your high school. And looking at your story, we had a very similar path in that I was a pretty small kid, for the first couple of years of high school, and I really felt like that helped me develop my feet. And then it sounds like you had the same thing where you grew. I think your junior year, you had some growing pains, but when you came out of it, you were super athletic and super fast. I was just goofy. But talk to us a little bit about, maturing in high school, and, you broke the record for goals scored. So you obviously had some success. You were a captain. So that was fun. But, what do you remember most about your high school playing days?
Yeah. So first off, my freshman year, I don't know what you were. My freshman year, I was 5'1", 95 pounds.
Yeah, you had me.
A little bit. Yeah, I was tiny. So exactly. Like, playing varsity your freshman year, you're a little guy. You have to, rely on being kind of smart, being good with your feet. But I also made sure I still had a little bit of bite to me as well. But then, after that, I shot up, kind of hurt me in a way in the beginning of my junior year, trying to find schools because I was injured so much. I had the knee, the osteoarthritis. I'm sure everybody kind of dealt with that at some point, but I had really bad groin. So, going from having a lot of success to high school and then going into your academy season where you're hurt most of the year, most college coaches are looking at what you're doing for your club. So I wasn't necessarily being heavily recruited at all. I was offered a scholarship from Rider and Fairfield University, and that was it. So that was something where I was deciding on those two schools up until my senior year. And UCONN kind of came out of nowhere, where I knew a friend that was going there, that committed there. Ethan Decker, he plays in the USL now, great guy. His dad kind of mentioned to Ray Reed that, this guy doesn't really have a place to play. He's a good player. He hasn't really been seen. So I get a call one day from Ray saying, "We have a roster spot for you. Do you want to take it?" So I hang up the phone and I talk to my parents and I say, there's no scholarship here. Like, I know that at the time, like, I wanted to save money for my parents because that's what I wanted to give back to them for everything that they've done for me throughout my, youth career, because that traveling's crazy. And I'm sure that. But, my mom and dad both sat down and said, if you want to go for it and make the most of it. So I called them back the next day and I committed with a roster spot.
Yeah, and that had to be pretty, as a young guy, you don't really know what college is about, and you don't really know how well you're going to fit in. At the time, UConn's always had a great program, but if I'm correct, that was like the heyday, right? I mean, it was one of the heydays where they were like perennially number one in the nation. I know Andre Blake was probably there right before you. I know Kyle Laren was there. It's a pretty big soccer school. You had to be somewhat nervous going in as a kind of a non-scholarship freshman.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, like you said, they were number one ending their after the year, coming into the preseason poll at number one. They were coming off of 3 straight Elite Eight, appearances. I actually lived with Kyle Larin my first 2 years, so it's pretty cool to be able to play with him and call him a friend. But yeah, it was pretty intimidating. And the one thing my dad said, to me going into that preseason was just be the fittest guy on that team. Just do everything that you can right now to come in, because the first in college, the first thing is always the fitness test, and that's always like kind of starts you off. So we did the yo-yo test. I killed it. Like I crushed it. I beat everybody, all the seniors by 6-7 runs, and I think that like immediately kind of gave me a little bit of credibility, as in like, all right, this guy's here. He's not just here, and he's not just happy to be here. He wants to do something. So I appreciated that advice from my dad, and it worked out.
Yeah. For those that don't know, and I think I know what the yo-yo test is. I don't think I've ever
heard
of
test. Yeah.
Okay, beep test. I just
I
wanted to make sure. Yeah. I want to, I think yo-yo test is a lot cooler. I might start saying that.
Sounds nice, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, that is great advice, and I think it's shocking to me how many people just don't prepare even at the pro level. Where guys just come in out of shape, and that's I think everyone that has made it to the pro level has probably played with someone that was better than them, or equally talented, but just couldn't make the commitment to put the work in. And it sounds like your dad gave you really good advice. You had your first year, you guys you come in and you end up becoming the starter by the end of the year. I think y'all had like a pretty crazy run. I know y'all beat UCLA and in UCLA. Yeah. That was a big win for you as a freshman. You eventually, same thing, right? You become a captain, you become a regular. Did you always start? You played defense the whole time. I know you came in kind of as a goal scorer out of high school, but it sounds like you were pretty committed to defense at that point.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, Ray Reid was not moving me up. We had, Kyle Larin at the time, and I feel like I didn't have a leg to stand on with that one. So I'm glad he stayed up top and I stayed at right back.
And so when you started having success there, I mean, was it okay? I'm fitting in. I'm doing well. Like, did it start becoming, you see some of these other guys you go to school with? I think, I think you might have been the 35th guy to sign a MLS contract out of UCONN, something along those lines. Which I was the 35th guy to sign out of my college. Little connection there.
Nice.
But it's curious. I'm just curious as to what your mindset was like, or, hey, I'm having success, like I'm going to go to MLS, or was that really just, I'm focused more on my studies and playing ball for the school?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, until my senior year, I didn't really think that it was a possibility. I had success my freshman, sophomore, and junior year. I was maybe one of the top 5 guys on our team. I was never like, it was like, oh, it's Jake, this is Jake's team. It wasn't like that. I always kind of just tried to be a leader and keep my head down and work as hard as I possibly could. But, going into my senior year, I don't know if have you ever heard of Top Drawer Soccer?
Yeah.
They always do the preseason rankings for like the top 10 defenders, midfielders, and forwards, and you take it however you want it. But, going into my senior year, I was shocked to see myself on the top 10 for like the watch list of defenders. So at that point I was like, oh, maybe, people are noticing me, and maybe there is there's a chance. I had good talks with my coach, Ray Reid, and he was somebody that always supported me and, always wanted to, see me succeed. And he was honestly a great coach to me. So that was, going into the senior year, we honestly didn't have a great year my senior year, unfortunately. But I was, invited to the combine, and the same kind of thing was, my dad going back to my freshman year, he was like, be the fittest. And he was like, he told me, make sure, I know I'm an athletic guy. I'm not some guy who's going to be dribbling and, being flashy and all that. But when you do those 3 tests for the combine, just be in the top 3 for everything. And if you could do that, I think, people will start looking at you just purely off an athleticism, and then they could see how you play. And I was able to do that, and I was able to finish top 3 in those 3 categories that they used to do. And I started getting a lot of meetings with clubs, with MLS teams. I think I met with almost every single team, just purely probably because they had no idea who I was. So it was pretty cool.
I think you're being a little humble there, which I love. Before we get to those tests, I think did you graduate with a degree in history?
Yes, history and political science. Yeah.
And you're cum laude, right? That's
yeah.
Yep. Congrats. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And then I saw you are you a Spanish speaker? You're in the Spanish Honor Society. Does that mean you have to speak Spanish to be in Spanish?
Don't make me speak Spanish right now.
No, you can
no,
say it to me. I understand it, but I don't listen. I'm the
I understand it. I could somewhat speak it, but not to any extent where it's fluent or having full-on conversations.
I thought that was cool. I think that, that they're now making guys on both sides. The league is predominantly English and Spanish speaking, so I think it's good to it's got to be great for you to be able to communicate with guys, or at least know what they're saying about you behind your back.
Exactly.
Cool. What else? So you talked about the combine. It was out in Los Angeles.
Yep.
You had the speed and agility, which is code for quickness, and then power, which is code for jumping, for those that don't know. And you were the only guy, I think, in the top 3. So obviously that was important. I'm sure you played well as well to get all those interviews. I saw some interesting things where you weren't really expecting to go in the first round, but you were taken 7th by Vancouver. Talk me through what was going on, the build up to it, and then finding out, and what were your emotions were when you realized, like, I always imagine, like, you're like, I'm going to Vancouver, like, where's Vancouver? Like one of those things.
Yeah. I mean, so the night leading up to the draft was pretty wild, to be honest. It was, I was talking to my agent, he'd call me every 2-3 hours through the night. So if I can give you like a somewhat of a timeline. So it was like, he'd call me at 8 p.m. and he'd be like, yeah, you know what, listen, you might go in the 4th round. Like, that's what I'm hearing right now. So, maybe you don't go to the draft, you don't have to go to the, the actual draft. And I was like, okay, all right. And then he'd call me at like 11 p.m. He's like, all right, now I'm hearing potentially 2nd, 3rd round. He's like, maybe we go now. And it was, I think at like 2:30, he kept calling me. Like, I was leaving my buzzer on loud, my phone on loud. At 2:30, he calls me and he goes, do you have a suit? And I was like, yeah, I do have a suit. Yeah, I brought one just in case. He's like, all right, I think 1st or 2nd round for you. And that's what I'm hearing. So get some sleep. And I was like, oh, get some sleep now. Okay.
Stop calling.
After 2:30. Yeah. Yeah. So we get to the draft day. About 10 seconds before they called my name, my agent just tapped me on the shoulder and said, this is you. And so I hear my name. This is probably one of the coolest moments of my career, to start my career. It was awesome.
Did you know anything about Vancouver or anything about, I mean, was it just kind of obviously you're excited and you're thrilled, but what was your next set of emotions?
I didn't know a single thing. The only thing I knew, so going back to my uncle, who's a season ticket holder at Union, I went to a game with him against Vancouver, and Kekuta Mane scored a hat trick. And that is the only thing I know about Vancouver, Vancouver Whitecaps. And I knew that it was also the furthest place I could have possibly been drafted to from New Jersey.
That's right. So I say, people say, oh, I've got to go across the country. And I said, it's not actually this country. You're going to Canada. Yeah. So
exactly.
Terrible dad joke on taxes, but I'll save you from that one. Let's talk about your first year. Actually, didn't you have to go like immediately to Wales?
Within 2 days.
So like
2 days we went to Wales for preseason. Yeah.
And you're like,
wild.
I'm going to go the opposite way. Okay. Well, talk to me about your first year. You had as is the case with a lot of college guys, you come in pretty good shape and you're ready to go. But you were able to sustain that success in your first year. y'all, I think, if I remember correctly, y'all had a pretty good playoff run that year, right? And you played all those games, and
Yeah.
what were your expectations? Did you exceed them? Talk to me a little bit about year one.
Yeah, I had a great conversation with Carl Robinson at the time. He was somebody that always was outspoken about playing young players, playing rookies. So he said that when you get your chance, just take it because you will get a chance. So fortunately, I was able to about maybe halfway through the season, and I kept that starting spot. I was able to get a few assists, which was great to be an attacking right back. That's kind of what I wanted to be, in my career. And then we had a great year my first year. I think going into the last day, we played Portland. We were first in the Western Conference. We ended up losing and finished third. And then we had to go to Seattle and play against them in the semifinals in front of 72,000 fans, which was just something so surreal. I actually ended up tearing my hamstring about 35 minutes in, so that was cut short, unfortunately. But it's something that I will not forget.
Yeah, and I tell people all the time, Seattle's, if you could really only go to one or two cities, it's definitely on my short list, just for those moments where they're great. They put a great product out, and I know you participating in that that Northwest rivalry with the teams up there. That had to be a lot of fun for you. Talk to me a little bit about you have success that first year. Who was who helped you out? I used to ask who made it hard, and I think that's tough on guys. But was there anyone that Carl helped you out as a coach? Did anyone else take you under their wing? Now that you are considered a veteran at 28, taking guys under your wing, who was your helper of the first year?
Yeah, it was Tim Parker, who is my teammate now, which is pretty cool to have that come back around. Play together my first year, and then we meet up again 6 years later. But he's somebody that he's a New York guy, so we kind of bonded over being just East Coast, close to each other and kind of having the same kind of mentality and stuff like that. And he helped me a lot, just kind of get used to the lifestyle. Made sure that I was never alone too much. I was hanging out with the guys. Really brought me into the team. So I owe a lot to him, and it's pretty cool that I get to play alongside him now again.
And if I asked him who was a better dresser of you two, who would he say?
Oh, I mean,
he fancies himself, but I think you got it.
He does fancy himself. He can he can say he can have it if he wants it, but I think we know.
All right. Well, I'll let the fans decide on that one. Talk to me a little bit about, so Vancouver. When I think of Vancouver, there's so much turnover is kind of, and you lived through that, right? I mean, I think when you left, you were like the most tenured, you have records for games played. You're in the top 2 or 3 of for that club. Talk to me a little bit about the coaching turnover and the player turnover, and just kind of what that was like, and what that did for you, maybe positive and negative, if it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I had 4 coaches in 6 years, so I mean, it was a lot, and each coach, obviously wanted their own type of players, their own guys to bring in. So it was really just me and Russell Tybert that stuck through since my first year. At one point, I think even my 3rd season, it was still me and Rusty that were the only 2 from my first season. So in 2 years, everyone was gone, and it was a whole new batch of players coming through. So it was difficult, and obviously we didn't have the success that I wanted or the club wanted in those years. So it was kind of a grind, and for me personally, I was playing in a lot of different positions too throughout the years. I played a lot of left back, a lot of left center back, right center back. So it was something where I was happy to be playing because I wanted to play, but I wasn't playing in my preferred position, so it was always kind of a little more difficult in a way.
Yeah, and I've seen some of the quotes for some of those periods where you were either, benched or maybe sent down for, I think, a game or two. And I feel like you're very, you're a humble guy. You're very hard on yourself, maybe a little too much. But we opened this podcast talking about a year that, sometimes you have these years where everything goes your way, right? And maybe, hopefully, knock on wood, we're in one of those now. I'd have to imagine there were a couple years there where you're thinking everything's going against you. And COVID year was especially one of those. But there was such a cool story in your life. And that was, the marriage and your girlfriend / fiance / now wife. Talk to the fans and people that are listening, because your marriage story, if it weren't for COVID, I'm not saying your marriage story wouldn't be cool, but it's definitely much cooler to someone like me than, hey, we had a destination wedding in the off season and we got married. Tell everyone about that process.
Yeah, it's cool to tell the story now. At the time, it was pretty stressful and a lot, but I'll try to keep it somewhat short. So, yeah, during COVID, my wife, my girlfriend at the time, was she was in Vancouver with me. She's from Pennsylvania originally, so we had to go to that MLS Back tournament, in the summer to get games in. And my wife decided to go home because she didn't want to be, in another country, 3,000 miles away from her family as well. So she flew home to Pennsylvania. And upon, me returning, and then, my wife, Allie, came back the next day to come in, and, the Whitecaps, assured us like, yeah, she'll be fine to get in, because we weren't married at the time. And the rules at the time were you need to be a family member to be allowed back into Canada. It was a whole mess. So she gets to customs, and they actually detain her. They say, no, you cannot. She's 5'1". She's like this little sweet girl, being detained by 7 officers, being taken out of the country technically. And she had to get on a next flight to Seattle and fly back home to Pennsylvania. So we didn't know how long COVID was going to last. Nobody did at the time. So we were engaged at the time, and we were planning on getting married in December, like most MLS players. I think everybody's probably got a similar wedding date.
Yep.
So we didn't know when the next time we'd be able to see each other, and we were trying to figure things out, make things work. And my mother-in-law came across this article that showed there's a park. It's called Peace Arch Park, that is halfway in Canada and halfway in the US. So on the border of Vancouver and Washington. So it was like this neutral land where people could come and meet up and spend time with their loved ones in a different country that can't come together. So nothing was enforced. There were officers there and all that, and we're like, well, maybe we should just see if we can get married there. So I ended up calling the county office in the US there, getting a marriage certificate all ready to go. My dad was a judge at the time, so he was going to do the ceremony. We got a notary and all that. So, I drive down the border, got to the park, on my own. My wife and my family, my parents, sister, and her parents are there. And we do this little ceremony, and we end up getting married. And I go back over the border, hop over the little road, and she walks down into customs in her white dress with a suitcase, and goes and tells them, I just got married, so I can come in. And they're like, okay. And that's how we were reunited and married.
I think that's awesome. And for those, I encourage those listening there's a photo he has online on, I think it's probably on both your Twitter and Instagram, but it's an awesome photo of you guys in that spot. So I think that's awesome. Maybe other people don't, they'd see the stress of it. I think it's a really cool story and something you can tell your kids about. So let's go back to soccer. We'll stay in Vancouver, because Vancouver was my favorite city to go visit. I obviously never went there when it was freezing cold, and I don't like cold, but Vancouver has one of the highest qualities of life in the world, not just Canada or the US. I'm pretty sure yoga pants were invented there, which I think everyone would agree benefits society. But all joking aside, what makes that place so special, and what are you going to remember most about your time in Vancouver?
yeah, it's beautiful. It has, it has the mountains, it has the city, it's got the water. They have beaches within the city. There's always something to do. It's clean, it's safe. It's something that, it's my wife's favorite place. It was obviously tough for us to leave, but it's somewhere that will always feel like home to us. We spent a while there. But it's beautiful. There's that. My wife's she said her favorite spot in the world. She hasn't really traveled the world yet, but we'll
Hey,
we'll
no
get
need
there
for
though.
that. No need
I
for
promise.
that.
I told her we'll get there eventually, but she said the seawall that goes around the city. It's like a little walkway that goes all the way around the city into the little path, and it's just it's incredible.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
before we move to where you're at now, I do want to highlight you won an award there called the Jock McDonald Award, and that was kind of for your work off the field. I believe that award was named after a former kitman for the Canadian national team. I hope I got that right, because I know there's another artist named Jock McDonald, but I just can't see the tie there. But I know you did a lot of work with children's hospitals, and you work with an organization called Hope and Health. Can you just talk a little bit, if you want to talk about Hope and Health, please do, but just talk a little bit about why are you so giving with your time off the field?
Yeah. So when I first drafted, I had another conversation before I left with my parents, and they kind of sat me down and told me that, to use my platform for good, to give back to, the community that you're in, because it's so important to, and you have that, a great opportunity to do that while being a professional soccer player. So I took that to heart, and I made sure, to make the most of that. And, the first thing, we went to a team visit to the children's hospital, and I kind of just, fell in love with that experience, and, talking to these kids and their families, and just trying to give them a little bit of a, release from the real world. So what I did with that was I bought 4 season tickets for Vancouver, and I gave them each home match I gave to a family at the children's hospital to come out to the game. And, I thought that's, the least I could possibly do, just, for them to kind of get away for a bit and enjoy something and have fun, and then bring them onto the field after, take pictures, meet some of the guys. So that was really special. And another thing that I became involved with was Hope and Health, and that's, to build up the Indigenous youth in, throughout BC and Canada. And that was, something I became really friendly with the founders, which was, Ed Georgica, who worked with the club at the time. And we would go and have, we would do like soccer camps with them, give them cleats, give them soccer balls, give them an outlet, to be safe and to enjoy, and to give them an opportunity that they, wouldn't have otherwise. And I was, fortunate enough to be a part of that for my entire time in Vancouver, from my rookie year until I left. So that was something really special to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know, you also focus on mental health. I believe your sister's involved in mental health awareness. Yep. And helping. So it sounds like you've got a very good family, and that's really cool that they've, are part of helping ground you. And I think anytime you win an award like that, it just shows that, there's guys out there that really care and are trying to make a difference. So let's talk about how it ended, right? You decide, whether you decide or the team decides it's time to make a move. How did it come about that, you found out you were leaving, and what role did you play in figuring out how to get to St. Louis?
Yeah. So, after the season ended, I didn't have too much contact with the club. And, 5 years prior, I was, I had a good relationship with kind of everybody in the club, the sporting director, the coach. It was, it felt right. And this off season, I kind of had an inkling that I probably wouldn't be here, be there again. So, at the time when the deadline hit, my option was declined, and I was already looking at other clubs. I was looking at other right backs, to see what teams need right backs, and that's kind of what you just generally do. And I came across St. Louis. I saw everything that was being built here. I saw, what the playing style that Lutz and Brad wanted. And I just thought that this could really be a place for me to, excel, because I think that really brings out my best attributes. And I thought it would always be pretty cool to be a part of an expansion club, because all of that hype, all that excitement, and St. Louis has, surpassed my expectations of that twofold. So it's been pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it's expansion clubs in theory are really exciting. Just depends on, in this game, it's all about results, right? But
Right.
what about your family? I'd imagine moving, I think you had your child at that point. Is that?
Yeah, she's Canadian.
So moving with a brand new babies, I've done that before, and my wife to this day will never let me forget that. That had to be exciting and kind of stressful at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously at that point you have to put into consideration not just you and your career, but what's best for my family. And there was other clubs that I was interested in, and they were interested in me, but it just didn't feel like that would be the best situation for my wife and my daughter. So we spoke about St. Louis. It's a nice 2-hour flight from New Jersey, quick flight. So that kind of that made sense as well, because getting to Vancouver from New Jersey was an absolute nightmare. It's always tough to travel, across the border and have to deal with customs and all that. So, the setup here, it made sense, and my wife was on board, and I was, fortunate enough for them to want me as well. So it worked out.
Yeah, and let's talk about this expectations coming in, right? Like, I don't mean what your expectations were. I mean, what was the internal messaging? Because you've never been a part of an expansion team, and probably most of those guys there hadn't either, whether they're coaches or staff or, what was the messaging? I mean, was it, hey guys, we're going in this year to make the playoffs? Is it, hey, we're playing for MLS Cup? I mean, what were you hearing early on? And if you don't feel like I need to be brought in the locker room, and we don't, that's fine too.
Yeah.
But just kind of, people are fascinated with what's going on there. Just talk, whatever you can share, bring us in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so when I first got there, Brad and Lutz didn't come out of come out of the gate going, we're going to make the playoffs, we're going to go for the MLS Cup. It was more of, we're going to get our style of play down, we're going to get our principles down, and if we do that, we're going to be successful. We're going to take it one game at a time. And I really appreciated that from Brad. Him, the way he speaks to us, and his mentality. It all just made sense for me. I was like, all right, I think I'm in the right spot here, because the mentality around the club, the players, the staff, it all was right. So it wasn't, we weren't putting too much pressure on ourselves or putting too high of expectations. It was just a matter of, we need to believe in the system that we want to play, and if we do that, we're going to be successful.
Yeah, and for me, I think at first you didn't get the credit y'all deserve with the Austin game, and I think you've had some games this year where it's been some comical errors on the defensive side on the other team, but that doesn't take away from the work y'all are I mean, like, someone's like, oh, they had a guy pass it backward. They scored 3 goals. They still scored 3 goals in both those games, and then another one happens. Like, they're still winning on the road. It's like, people are like, wow, this team really is opening eyes. And we talked about, you were used to turnover in Vancouver. As an MLS fan, I know probably most of these names better than most people. And I looked at the roster and I was like, I don't know who a lot of these guys are. And y'all are good. Like, these guys, they did their homework. They got some really good players. I'd have to imagine that the expectation from, let's take it a game at a time. And it's still early. There's a lot of soccer left. And I'm not a jinx person, but I do believe that you guys, I'll go from the conversation of like, hey, let's just have a good expansion year, figuring out how to play, to, I almost feel like now I'm expecting y'all to be in the playoffs, and maybe that's premature, but I would have to imagine in the locker room, it's like, we've beaten some pretty good teams. We've won on the road. we've played some really good MLS teams already and held our own. I'd have to imagine y'all's expectations have morphed a little bit to we're expected to win a lot of these games now.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you start a season 5-0, and you're playing well. You have 15 goals for and 4 against at the time. Like that is something that you can't dispute. But going back even to preseason, the first 2 weeks we're training, and I'm like, I mean, these guys are good. Like we have a good team. Like we have a group of guys that have the skill, have the work ethic, and they don't have the ego. And it's something that was like really refreshing to see and to play with. So it was pretty. I knew from the beginning that I think we could be something good. And we had really strong preseason performances. We still had obviously all the analysts saying we're going to finish last, and that's fine and all of that, but they didn't see the work that we put in for those 6 weeks in preseason. And to come out and beat Austin away and then beat Portland away, like those are 2 really tough places to go in and win, especially as a first year team. So I think that kind of proved a lot as well. And now there is an expectation now, and we hope that we can continue our success.
Yeah, let's end it on you. What's next? Like, what are your big goals? We joke about you being, the old guy at 28, but, what would you like to see next? Whether that's individually, accolades wise, team wise, or, I'm kind of wondering if you have a great year here with the way you play, right? National team coach, is that on your radar as well?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing for me is longevity. I want to be able to play for a while. I don't want, because I know guys like me, they can sometimes go under the radar where you're not really known too well, and I'm okay with that. But I think that that happened in Vancouver. It's a place where it doesn't get much media attention, where you're not that many people are watching games, and it is what it is. We're up up in the corner. So it's something that, I was hoping that I can play, for a long time, have a nice long career and, play games as well. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Anything else that comes, I'm continuing to work hard and, perfect my craft, trying different things every day after training to, keep getting better. And that's really where I'm at right now.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I kind of hinted at you had a social media presence. I'm a fan of guys that aren't afraid to, stand by their opinions. You've done that. You've got family photos, the occasional photo of your abs. I would encourage those listening, if you've enjoyed this, please go give him a follow on all the platforms that he's on. Listen, you play an exciting brand of soccer. You bring that attacking element to the defensive position, which I was never able to do. So I appreciate it when other guys can. I really just want to thank you for your time today and telling the people about your journey and your story so far. And you've made a fan out of me. And I know the other people listening will have nothing but support for you on the rest of your journey. So that is Jake Nerwinski, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Play by Players. Visit playbyplayerspod.com for more episodes or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
This has been a production of the MLSPA. Learn more at mlsplayers.org.